Alright, you guys, picking up where we left off on part 2. We're going to move on to our building our thrust tube for our micro bat wing. When we left off, I was just finishing up the assembly of the main fuselage and the main wing. I was telling you to stick tape. Hopefully you can see that. Stick clear tape wherever you want to strengthen up your foam. I put it on all my pieces, front and back. See all my clear tape lines. I'm also going to show you right now how to cut out your battery hatch. Just take your main fuselage, mark some lines right near the very edge. I'm about maybe a centimeter in. I'm going to mark it on both sides. And we're going to go ahead and cut at a 45-degree angle toward the inside of the fuselage. Just make sure to stay right on your line. Same for the other side. 45-degree angle pointing inward. I'm not going on the line on this side because I want it a little further in. Go ahead and cut a 45 toward the front of the fuselage, the back of your battery hatch. So there we got our battery hatch. Take some of your tape. You can put this on the left or right hand side, whatever you want to do. Just stick it back on here where we cut it off. I'll make sure you line it up real nice. Fold your tape over. There you go, there's your battery hatch. Now you'll be able to access your battery. You can put a magnet on there if you want to hold it down, but actually once you build this and the jet engine's taken in through the air intake there, it kind of keeps itself shut. Like I said, you can do it the way you want to do it. Alright, so that's where we left off with all this. I'm going to show you really quick on painting these. Got our testers, flat black. I usually hold my can a good distance away because it doesn't take a lot of this to cover. I mean, you'll see that when you start painting. Make sure you tape before you paint. I even clear taped all my edges anywhere I thought it was a little weak. Alright, so moving on to building this thrust tube. Here we got our thrust tube. We're going to be putting the 28mm because that's all I got laying around right now. This is for the 28mm ducted fan. It's going to install inside the thrust tube right there. As you can see where it's marked. The thrust tube is 3 3/4 inches long. So I buy this at the dollar store, little kids coloring books. Got an assortment of them here. And the I guess the gauge of this is probably about the same as a paper plate. I used to use these to make my thrust tubes. Then I found these, and the reason I like them is because this nice smooth surface is on the inside of your thrust tube. Let's go ahead and I already went ahead and marked 3 3/4. 3 3/4. You can leave yourself some extra length because we're going to cut that off. Like I said, this stuff's about as thick as a paper plate. So if you can't find the exact same stuff I got here, go ahead and maybe use a paper plate. I used to use them. Just going to cut off this a little extra long. Here you got your 28mm fan unit. I already bent it around there to kind of form to it. There you go. So now what I'll do is go ahead and where you curled it in and it meets up with it, mark past that line just a hair. You're going to have to leave a little overhang so you can glue these two pieces together. So now that I marked it there, go ahead and get a measurement on that. Let's see here. We got make sure it's nice and flat. 3 7/8. So I'll come over here, down at the other end, mark it 3 7/8. Now your thrust tube is going to be nice and straight throughout. I don't like angle mine down in the back of my thrust tubes. It just kind of just cuts off your thrust. So I just make it a straight tube. Go ahead and mark that line. Go ahead and cut this axis off. Come back with your EDF unit. And there we see it's all good. I go ahead and just leave the EDF unit in the middle of it, just to keep it looking nice and round. Now we can go ahead and just stick a little hot glue across this, close it up. Go ahead and wipe off your excess hot glue. So make sure it's nice and tight. You want your thrust tube to be sealed. And go ahead and do the same on this side. Go ahead and just hold it till it's nice and set. Just a little bit right there. So you wipe off your excess. You don't want big old drips going everywhere. You ain't got to worry about this line because we're going to bury it in the fuselage like that. Now, like I said, I made this cutout small just so I can cut it out to fit this. I didn't want to cut it too big in the beginning. So just long as you cut on your lines for your 28 or your 30, you'll always be right to size, so you can come back and trim out that little bit extra. Alright, now I'll push my EDF unit toward the front. And as you can see on the plans, it's actually 3/8 of an inch. Oh no, that's for your 30 millimeter. For your 28 millimeter, that is, I think I measured it on here for that. 3/16. So just eyeball where you want it. I'm guessing that's about 3/16. So I would take this out, put some foam safe glue or super glue. Actually, you'll find when you got your motor on these fan units, they have your lines going to it from your receiver, and they'll be hanging out the back. So what you do is you just trim out a little hole. I'll show you real fast. Just line this up here. You're going to want to cut a hole right near the back of where the wire is going to come out of this. And I usually do it opposite side of that line. Just go ahead and mark it. Like I said, then you just go ahead and cut out a little notch to feed your wires through. Make sure you do this before you install your fan unit. Now you would just take your wires, feed them through the hole, pull them out as you're sliding this in. Remember, put some super glue around there, whatever you're gonna use to hold this in there. And make sure you push it in about 3/16. Maybe even just 1/8 would do. There you can see where your wires will come out. So there's your thrust tube. You can go ahead and make this round before you install it. So you just squeeze it where you want it. Show you how I get it around. Just eyeball it up. This stuff will all get a lot stiffer too as you paint it. You hot glue it in, all this will get stiff. It ain't gonna move around on you. I use the same material for building my thrust vector units. We'll get to that in another build video. Alright, so I got my thrust tube made. We're going to set it in here. Just kind of see how much more I need to cut out. Say about maybe a 1/16. I'm just going to come in here, eyeball out a 1/16. Make sure when you install your thrust tube that you don't force it in there. You want to leave this, cut this out a little loose, or else you might deform the fan shroud and it'll be rubbing on your fan blade. See what we got with that. Looks like it's going to be good. Alright, so before you go pushing this up through the bottom, now make sure your motor wires are on the left side of your jet. It's the left side, front of the jet, left side. Once your wires are hanging out there, you won't be able to push it all the way through, of course. So install it from the top down. Get it where you want it. Take and straighten out my exhaust tube some here. And that looks good. I'll just push this in a little bit. Make sure you make this nice and round. just like that. You want to make sure that your thrust tube is perfectly half sticking out the top and half sticking out the bottom. So you want it the same. And then go ahead and once you got that set in place, do a little test fit with your main fuselage to make sure you ain't rubbing on it. As you can see, mine fits good. This is the 28mm, so the 30mm you'd have more clearance up there to make it. Alright, so now that we got the thrust tube on there, now you just go ahead of course my line ain't where it should be. This line should actually be in this crease, so that way you don't see it when you hot glue this in. So I actually cut this little hole in the wrong spot, but that's all you gotta do is turn your thrust tube to where this line is hidden by this body line, and then notch out where your hole for your motor wires are coming through. Now we just go ahead and just hot glue this. Quick little bead of hot glue. Just a little spot right there. You're going to want to hot glue from the bottom and the top. Just stick a little bead. I would only go maybe about a quarter of this tube to the back. You don't have to do the whole tube from the top, because then you'll just see your hot glue sticking out. There we go. Alright, so there's our 28mm thrust tube that we made. As you can see, the thrust tube's got the EDF fan unit in there, fan shroud. Of course, you'd have your fan blade already in there and your motor already installed. Now if you wanted to, you just go back, and now you want to apply your paint. So like I said, you just hold your can back a ways. You don't need a lot of paint on these. It covers nice and easy with very little paint. So do a quick little shoot of it. Don't even cover it all. Let that dry real fast, then just shoot it again, and you'll see that it'll cover really nice, and you won't have to use a ton of paint and make your plane heavy. Alright, so moving on from there, we're going to go on to, now after you painted it, installed your thrust tube and painted it, then you'd want to start applying your electronics with your receiver. Your battery's going to go under your hatch. Your servos, it's all on your plans where everything goes. There's our EDF unit with the thrust tube. Here's the front of your bat wing. Here's your LiPo battery, receiver unit, and your servos. Here's your CG line. So you'll find your CG line runs basically kind of just behind these edges. So once you install all your electronics, you'll have like this. Now if you choose, you can run your wires through the plane underneath your main fuselage to your receiver. You can see I got my receiver in there. Got my control rods coming back from the servos back to my control horns. It's very important on the first flight to make sure your elevons are slightly angled up in the back. As you can see how those are. This plane is designed like that to where the elevons are up a little high in the back. So make sure yours looks similar before you go throwing it in the air. Here you can see where I got my ducted fan installed. Me, I didn't even hot glue mine. I just used tape to tape my thrust tube in, because a lot of times you might want to pull this thrust tube out of this plane and put it in another one, so you just cut your tape and pull your thrust tube out. I just did it with a hot glue gun here, so I mean, it's to your preference, whatever you want to do. Like I said, again, don't forget to apply your clear tape. You can do all that clear taping before you paint your jet. And if you do paint it before you do it, then just clear tape afterward, and then if you want, you can shoot another little thin coat over that. On your first flight, when you go to fly this bat wing, I would recommend, when you put your LiPo battery in here, that you move it a little bit far forward. Something like that. And I'll show you with mine. That's probably about right there is where you see it. Try to leave it a little bit far forward in your battery hatch here. That way your CG will be forward. And then from there, you can figure out how it flies. If it needs to change the center of gravity a little, just move the battery around in the compartment a little bit. Find the sweet spot. Alright. I think that'll about do it for wrapping up the bat wing. If you guys got any questions or anything, you guys can just email me. So let's do a quick recap. We got our plans. We followed the build videos. Cut out our plans. Make sure you save all your scraps for your plans, in case you need to go back and look at where your servos are going to be placed, all your electronics. Like I said, you're going to want your elevons angled up in the back a little bit, almost about like that for your first flight. You see we got that little bit of dihedral in there that we built in there in the previous video. Just a slight dihedral. I could probably give you an idea of what that dihedral is if you took two pencils and stuck them on the table. You'd want your pencils about right there. And when you cut your line for your dihedral, you score it, fold it, then take and put it on your pencils and just push down on the center of the plane, down to here. Then just go ahead and make sure you got your hot glue. So hot glue, put it on your pencils, push down in the center, and that's how you'll find your dihedral. Same one I got here. Alright guys, that'll about wrap it up. I'll get back with you some more builds. Over and out.